Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we ask the question, did the Emperor orchestrate the loyal Primarch disappearances? General spoiler warning to begin, as today we will be referencing events from across the Warhammer 40k universe. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Now, one of the biggest things I always find interesting to consider with the Emperor is just how much does he know of the future? How much of the events that transpire happen according to his plan? Throughout the Heresy series, it's been a constant theme, a reoccurring debate topic. I personally side with the notion he didn't expect the heresy, given how catastrophically it's all played out. However, there's equally many who feel the Emperor did in fact expect it, or even plan for it to happen. As always with the lore, it's just down to how you see and interpret it. Regardless of the truth, we have had some good insights into the Emperor's foresight. Within the novel Master of Mankind, we saw him attempting to describe it to one of his custodies. And to paraphrase, he likened it to standing on the shore, viewing a distant land across the sea. You can see your intended destination, and you can try your best to get there. However, you just don't know all the things that can happen along the way. You could try to swim, but you don't know the dangers in the water. Or maybe you could drown along the way. You could build a boat and get wrecked by a storm. Or you could get blown off course, even sunk. Or simply sail there peacefully. Maybe you even reach your destination, only to be killed by an army that was just out of sight. So for me, it's kind of like the Emperor can see the future he wants to get to, an elevated mankind free of the warp, and he's trying his best to get there, but he just doesn't know everything that could happen along the way to push him off course, requiring a new plan. And minor spoiler warning for the Siege of Terra here. Within Fury of Magnus, something we have discussed before, we saw the Emperor can now foresee a time in the future, the grim dark future, where long fought lost heroes return, and humanity truly fights back. Of course, down to personal interpretation, but to me, it's a logical assumption this refers to the loyal Primarchs returning, and Chaos truly having a fight on their hands. Considering we've got Rabute Gilliman and Lion L. Johnson back now, I don't think that's too much of a leap of faith or stretch to make. So, given the Emperor could see this new possible future, this distant shore, knowing him, you'd assume he'd formulate a plan to get there. And with that in mind, it raises today's question. Was he then involved somehow in the remaining loyal Primarchs' disappearances, ensuring they would be able to return for this possible future? Well, let's begin with what do we know of their disappearances? Rogel Dawn was last seen boarding an enemy vessel, surrounded by traitor forces. While previously in the lore he was said to have been killed in this encounter, that has since however been changed to only his hand having been found, since being stored within the Imperial Fist's phalanx. Corvus Corax left for the Eye of Terror, last seen hunting Lorgar. Vulcan returned in the War of the Beast, not seen since seemingly giving his life in this encounter. Robute Guilliman was slain by Fulgrim, preserved in stasis until his obvious resurrection. Leman Russ departed for the Eye of Terror. Jagatai Khan was lost in the webway. And Lion L. Johnson was slumbering within the rock, now freshly returned himself. Now, the Emperor has always been known to guide events, subtly manipulating people, even his sons, to get the results he desires. However, there are some fates here that simply don't work in that scenario for me. The first for me is Rogal's disappearance. Disappearing on a Chaos vessel leads to two logical possibilities, aside from being dead obviously. The first is he was captured. However, I think we have to rule that one out, as there's no way we would have gone 10,000 years without Rogal being imprisoned, mentioned by Chaos forces 100 times over. There's no way that has been kept a secret. The second is that he was trapped or entered into some kind of warp rift. With this all seemingly transpiring in the heat of battle, for me at this time, with what we currently know, makes it hard to believe the Emperor was involved, especially with Dawn losing his hand in the process. Another I struggle to see how the Emperor could be involved is Guilliman's fate. We've been lucky enough to witness this event in the first installment of the Dark Imperium trilogy, and as much as I love Guilliman, we have to give our props to Fulgrim here. It was nothing but a complete outsmarting of Guilliman by the Phoenician, from beginning to end. Fulgrim outsmarted Guilliman throughout the entire campaign, and then fairly convincingly defeated him in the battle, with Guilliman only being saved thanks to the intervention of his sons. The Emperor clearly had no involvement in those events, and really, if he wanted to keep a Primarch around for this possible future fightback, I don't think he'd want to do it by killing one, or at least to the brink of death in stasis. So Guilliman's another one where I just can't see it. Jagatai's is a little unlikely too, pursuing an enemy into the webway, an area where the Emperor would have no impact. But hey, you never know, when we get to it in the Scouring series, maybe Jagatai witnesses something that encourages him to follow, a sign from his father. It's at least a safer fate than Rogal or Robute's. Now the others, Vulcan, Corax, Russ or L. Johnson, there's at least a possibility the Emperor could have been involved in theirs somehow. Vulcan was previously merely out defending the unheralded people of mankind, a task the Emperor would have had no issue with, especially with Vulcan of all his sons. And in being a perpetual, I highly believe he has already reawoken from his death against the beast, and is simply out there somewhere still, unknown, helping those who can't help themselves. In general, just being the absolute legend that Vulcan is. Corvus Corax clearly became a bit overwhelmed with his grief. However, if there's one thing that he became resolute on in that time, it was the promise to his father to rid Chaos from the galaxy. In leaving the Ravenspire a year to the day of his self-imposed isolation, I think it's entirely possible the Emperor instructed or guided Corax to depart for the Eye, to hunt down his traitor brothers. I'm not saying it happened, just that it's possible. Leman Russ, for me, is the one Primarch we know for absolute certainty left on the instruction of his father. There is no one or no thing that could give him a vision so pure that Russ would immediately depart for the Eye of Terror. Whatever Russ is up to in the Eye, it most likely ties into Valdor's efforts too, with him also leaving after a vision from the Emperor. And finally, could Lionel Johnson have been saved by the Emperor's involvement at the destruction of Caliban? Again, definitely possible. I think it's more likely it was just the Watchers in the dark, but we can't say for sure the Emperor wasn't somehow involved. Within the novel The Lion, Son of the Forest, we saw what looked like to me a strong Emperor presence within the mysterious Caliban Forest walkways, the ones that L. Johnson not only awoke in, but learns to use to transport vast distances. First of all, there was a mysterious king on the edge of death, who the lion encountered twice. The king was oblivious to the lion's presence, circled by shadows, bleeding from a wound. For me, quite clearly a representation of the Emperor, one that, according to the Watchers, will only speak to L. Johnson after he asks the right question. Now, what is that question? Well, we'll discuss that some more next week. There was also what appeared to be an Imperial constructed building within this area of Caliban also, wherein the lion had to conquer aspects of his brothers, where he then received the Emperor's shield. For me right now, I lean more towards this being the Emperor having prepared for the truer, psychic aspects of his son's awakening, a bit like we've seen with Korax maybe. However, could it instead be the Emperor having prepared for his son's returns? Well, absolutely. Maybe that ravaged king was a portion of the Emperor waiting for the lion to return, only for his struggle against chaos to drain him more than he hoped. Who knows? But certainly this could all be a sign of the Emperor being prepared for L. Johnson's return. However, we can't necessarily say that means he was involved with his disappearance. So, if I had to decide one way or the other, I'd say while as ever with the Emperor, it's possible. I don't think it was likely he was involved with his son's disappearances, other than Leman Russ. Was he aware? Yes, most likely. But with it all happening so soon after the heresy, it's more likely he was unable to act. Aside from a conversation with Russ in a dream, we know the Emperor remains silent for the next 10,000 years, until Guilliman enters the throne room. And even that took what appears to be a monumental effort from the Emperor, drawing in those shattered aspects of himself. The Emperor undoubtedly knew of his son's returns to come, as we have seen from the heresy. However, rather than ensure his sons were able to return for it by guiding their disappearances, I think it's more likely he was instead preparing for their returns to come. Ever since Guilliman has returned, the Emperor has become active across the galaxy. He has soothed the warp in front of the Indomitus fleets, ensuring their faster travel and conquest of the galaxy. Signs of his saints have erupted in power across the galaxy also, and he saved Guilliman from death, chiding Mortarion before threatening Nurgle and burning his garden. And who knows, the Emperor's shield could have been stored in the Caliban walkways specifically for L. Johnson's return as well. Considering it's set a bit of a trend now, you'd expect all the sons to return with or be given some form of war gear by their father. If so, it's even further evidence to support the Emperor's preparation for this fight back. So while maybe he wasn't instrumental in the Primarchs' disappearances, Their future returns could be another matter entirely. The Emperor's been waiting for this moment, preparing for this moment for 10,000 years. And now, he's ready to fight back. But as always everyone, what do you think? Do you feel the Emperor was somehow involved with the loyal Primarch disappearances? If so, how do you explain the possible near-death experiences of, say, Rogel and Rabute? Do you feel he was maybe involved in only some, such as, say, Leman Russ? Or do you feel he was involved in none, instead, like I feel, preparing for that future fight back? Was the Emperor's shield part of the Lion's future return? Or did it instead have something else to do with the Lion's psychic awakening, the possible next evolution of the Primarchs? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow, and if you enjoyed this particular vid then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.